Hi everyone. This is the slideshow for the final readings we're doing for class, the Quality of Life Negative 2 readings. We'll go over these quickly. Just wanted to say thank you for a good semester. You've done a great job with the debates, and I know that this is a tough time, and you might be a little burned out, but we're almost there, and hopefully you're enjoying doing the debates and really exercising your brains. So two different disadvantages in our readings. First, the addiction disadvantage. Obviously, this is the Einstein reading. And there's kind of two parts of this. The first early part of the reading is proof that there is addiction, what we call the links in debate lingo. That digital media, we are addicted to digital media. He says that there's been an explosion of addicts of all kinds, that people are addicted to drugs, um, to alcohol, to sex, etc., etc. And that's part of his proof that we're also addicted to digital media. He just talks about the sheer number of hours spent doing something. There's a great quote about, like, if you spent 8 hours a day drinking alcohol, you'd be an addict. So of course, since we spend 8 hours a day on our screens, that we're addicts. He also makes a very important argument that will be important, especially when it comes to rebuttals for you to make. That he says that there's two different ways of seeing what addiction is. There's sort of the mental health way of seeing addiction as a disease of the individual and therefore a problem of the individual. And then there's the other way that's more about the environment and that sees addiction as something that we all participate in, a normal coping mechanism, but there are more kind of productive and destructive addictions. Um, for instance, I think he cites this famous study of rats where they were giving rats cocaine, and they had some of them just like in a regular kind of dingy cage, and the other ones had this super nice house with things to play on and all the food they could eat and everything. And the ones who lived in the crappy cage uh, became very addicted to the cocaine, and the ones who uh, lived in the nice place did not. So that's sort of proof that addiction is a coping mechanism. That when we have something better, uh, you know, we don't necessarily become. It's not about the drug itself. It's not about cocaine, but it's about our environment and how we respond to our environment. And if that's the case, then sort of the scientific definitions of addiction are too narrow, right? And we need to expand that definition to include things like, how long we spend on our devices. How much money we've spent on technology is more proof of our addiction. Um, the fact that we spend more time on our devices than we do any other single activity is some more proof of the addiction. Some of the readings, I don't think it's too much in Einstein, but some of our other readings talk about how our apps and such are designed with ludic loops in mind. Ludic means play, and it's like a ludic loop is like a slot machine, right? Where you play, you lose, you lose, you lose. You win, you get a spike of a dopamine and adrenaline, and that makes you play some more, and you lose, you lose, you lose, you lose. You win, right? And so there's this loop that kind of keeps you coming back time and time again. And many of our devices are designed in the same way. Obviously, our games are, but things like, think about social media. You get a like and you open your social media and it gives you a little dose of dopamine, and that kind of encourages you to post again. And then, you wait a while and then you get another like. And so those things, that helps answer it's the fault of the individual as well. No, right? Like these devices are actually designed to be addictive. Uh, and also our denial of the addiction, the fact that we refuse to accept that we're addicted, or to say that it's a problem, is classic behavior of an addict. Now the second part of this disadvantage, like all disadvantages, is the impacts. So what's the harm of being addicted? And each of the chapters after the first one kind of talk about different harms. We lose freedom, right? We're not free to just do whatever activity we want because we're addicted to our devices. Um, there's the chapter on spiritual impacts, that we become totally materialist and lose, our desire for spiritual growth and connection. Um, he says there's a social decline, that we become less civil and more narcissistic, that we lose community and connection, that we lose time and money, and we become more isolated and antisocial. There's also an emotional decline, that our emotions are tied up with our social media and our devices. For instance, we're more easily triggered. We're less able to regulate our emotions. And there's also a physical decline. And each of those, the social, physical, spiritual, emotional, each of those has like a section of a chapter in the reading. The physical decline is about the health harms of being addicted. Things like obesity and sitting too much and eye strain and lack of sleep and the harms to sleep. So you could take any of these chapters and kind of make them their own disadvantage, using for instance, the health decline and physical impact could be its own disadvantage. Or these just could be impacts to addiction, right? We're addicted in the first part, and here's some different impacts to addiction. So let's talk about some potential rebuttals here. Obviously, this is not a scientific definition of addiction. The official sort of medical definitions of addiction only say certain people are addicted to gaming, and in fact, there's even and the internet, and in fact, there's even a dispute among scientists whether this is actually addiction. So you can really push them on, is Einstein a medical professional? Is he a scientist? And look for sources that question the definition of addiction here. Obviously, we've talked on the affirmative side about the mental health benefits, and it's rare that something that's called an addiction also has benefits. Usually addictions are just sort of harmful, and so that's another way to both challenge whether this is an addiction as well as to challenge the impacts of this advantage. If Einstein is right that addiction is a normal coping mechanism, then other addictions would just replace this addiction, right? We would find something else to put in its place. And so therefore, kind of getting rid of digital media doesn't really do anything. You can always make that this is the fault of the individual, right? That there are mechanisms that the individual can take to restrain and moderate. And even Einstein is calling for moderation and individual action as a solution. So this isn't, again, as much a fault of digital media as it is of the individual, but also of the society that we're in, right? We're sort of the rats in a cage, and that's why we're becoming addicted. But you can't blame digital media for that, right? If we lived in a different environment, maybe so many people wouldn't be addicted. The second disadvantage here is from the Chesick reading, and this is about what kind of social media is doing to a friendship and our notions of friendship. They talk about how when we go down the rabbit hole and we're spending all this time online, that drains us of energy for face-to-face encounters and for friendly encounters. And it also drains time. They talk about some scientific studies of that there's a limit on how many people we can actually stay in touch with, because we only have so much time and so much energy. There's a limit on how many people we can stay in touch with. But what social media does is it puts us in touch with hundreds and maybe even thousands of people, and by doing so drains that time and that energy. The heated conversation kind of pulls us back into it. All the distractions online pull us back into it. And that further drains our time and our energy. And basically, the point here is that we end up spending time with sort of weak ties too much. And there's a trade-off kind of with face-to-face, in-person, strong ties. And so, we're losing sort of our strong ties and our strong friendships because of all this distraction and all this draining of energy and time. So some rebuttals. The author admits that social media has benefits for distant relations. That is, family or friends that live in different places. That helps you stay in touch. It helps you stay contacted. All of the networked individualism arguments are sort of rebuttals to this. Remember that those authors say we're not being antisocial online. It's actually enhancing our sociality. It's enhancing our friendship. In fact, there's some briefs that we have in the reading that say that people who are more social online are also more social offline. So there's not a time and energy trade-off between those two things. Smartphones are really useful for helping keep in touch with friends and helping keep in contact with friends. Kind of throughout the day, you can send a little text to somebody and say, basically, hey, I'm still thinking about you. Hey, I still care about you. Make plans, arrange. And so there's definitely benefits for friendships of these devices. You can also argue that people aren't confusing the two, that we have close friends and close family that we have strong ties with in our day-to-day lives. And our online friends we recognize are sort of more acquaintances and stuff. There's also some benefits, though, to online friends for certain people. Like if you have social anxiety disorder, or if you're shy, or you have some kind of condition, like a medical condition, or a status that makes you anxious to meet people face to face, you can often find groups of friends online, right? And otherwise, those people would be very socially isolated. So online networks give people a chance to make friendships and reach out in ways that they wouldn't before. Of course, you're all familiar with friendships online and offline and maybe the trade-offs and the benefits of them. So I encourage you to think of your own responses to these arguments. But I wanted to give you just a couple of possibilities here. And I hope that you are using your own brains to do rebuttals to these, because I think you have a lot of familiarity and expertise on some of these arguments. Remember, these are just the suggested advantages and disadvantages, and I'm opening this debate up. And if you want to take something and develop your own advantage or disadvantage, you're welcome to do that. You'll need to tell and give the other team a little more detail if you do so. But this is sort of more of a free-for-all. I think we're all kind of familiar with doing debate at this point and can do our own research. So if you want to do something that we're not talking about in class, go for it, and I look forward to hearing your arguments. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day.